stressed out because this is a big job for him.
He wasn't
I've heard
ready
that
for it.
he's not ready he is not ready
Right.
for it. He's not a leader. I'm sorry. He's just not
No,
a
yeah, he's
leader.
not.
And a leader, brings people up and supports them. And
if you're somewhat frail, then maybe you should not take the job. And also something else too, if you call yourself a sanctuary city, don't be surprised that people send, let's just say, the issue to you to take care of.
Resource response, that you have a local government, the city of Chicago, subsidizing the infrastructure of a crisis that's being caused by a governor in another state. I'm frustrated as well. Over 600 buses have arrived in the city of Chicago since I've been mayor. We didn't call for those buses, and the governor of Texas sending buses to the city of Chicago to create chaos in this country. And so our effort here in the city of Chicago, of course, is to continue to call on Congress to do its part, to do its job, because we need real immigration reform policy to actually take full effect. We have not had immigration reform policy.
You say you're a sanctuary city. Don't be surprised that people don't send migrants to your city. Now, before we get started on this video, it has recently came out that Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson has been, let's just say, having panic attacks. Now, guys, I'm not going to turn this into making fun of anybody who has panic attacks. I've seen people who have panic attacks. They're not fun. Obviously, those things absolutely suck. I understand anxiety very well. Trust me, I've been through the whole ordeal where I've had to go through, let's just say, I learned in recreational therapy how to channel my own anxiety. Of course, it still flares up from time to time. I'm not going to lie to you guys about it. I'm not going to hop up here and, just on a day where I'm actually anxious or anything like that. It's not any of the reasons why I've been missing days or anything like that. I just want to get that out of the way right now. I understand anxiety. I understand anxiety very well. So nobody's beating up on this guy because of his apparent anxiety attacks. Not to mention, this same report has been corroborated through another, let's just say, former reporter in the Chicagoland area. We'll play that here in a second. But obviously, Mayor Brandon Johnson has not been, let's just say, coping well with the migrant crisis, which, as I said before, if you are a sanctuary city and you claim that you want these migrants and that they are welcome, don't be surprised if a border state governor sends said migrants to your facility, to your city. And also at the exact same time, don't be surprised when the current president of the United States, who, by the way, is using these migrants as an agenda or a part of his agenda, allows it to occur. Before we get to all of this, there's going to be another video out on the immigration crisis, which, by the way, this situation is coming out of New York City, so make sure you guys stick around for that. But before we go any further, let's play this little segment here, because apparently Brandon, of course, and I've said this before, he wants the suburban areas of Chicago to shoulder a good portion of the burden.
Migrant crisis that has steadily become a crisis beyond the city limits. Mayor Johnson canceled this week's sit-down with several suburban mayors who are also dealing with rogue buses. But now we understand that meeting is back on, but with a much smaller scale. NBC5's V Win has more on this growing problem of housing and caring for asylum seekers.
Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson is scheduled to meet with a group of suburban mayors next week to provide an update on the migrant crisis and the city's ongoing efforts to house them.
Whether you agree or disagree with what's happening on the border, and I think we all agree the system's broken and how to fix it.
Mayor Gary Grasso of Burr Ridge received an invite as part of the executive board of the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus. He says one of his questions to Mayor Johnson at this meeting
Before we go any further, let me just go ahead and pose this question. Why do people move to suburban areas? They move to suburban areas to get away from the city. They move to suburban areas to get away from, let's just say, the chaos of the city, the taxes or the amount of rent you got to pay, basically the high cost of living. They also want to get out of there because of crime. They also want to get out of there because, let's just go ahead and put it out there, some of these people don't want to take public transportation anymore. They would much rather live in a suburban area where they are a little bit more free. And also, to go on top of this, they feel like they've earned the right to actually be able to live in a suburb because maybe they've saved their money, made money, maybe they've, maybe gotten married, had children, or maybe they're trying to raise a family, that type of thing there. And obviously, they want to live in some form of security and some form of peace. However, Brandon Johnson has got this thing where he now wants to send these migrants to these suburban areas. Now, We've talked about the suburban towns and the mayors and, of course, how it is that they've basically said, no more buses, go back to the city, go back to Texas, go back to Mexico, whatever. They basically said, look, we don't want these people here at this moment in time. We can't take them in, which is something I quite frankly called. Now, these suburban areas, for the most part, vote heavily Democrat. I wouldn't call them real, true, honest-to-God, bleeding heart liberals or anything. I would call them more basic left-leaning moderates who typically tend to vote Democrat. They typically tend to be tough on crime, and they want to live in some form of security and some form of freedom. It kind of goes back to what I've been saying about separation. You know, the people who live in the cities who demand that these communities be organized, they're the actual, real, true racist of the actual society itself. However, these people who live in suburban areas, I'm not saying that they are racist or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. So don't think that I'm actually saying this. I'm saying this because these people obviously lived in the city at one time, and now they want to do what? They want to get out of the city. They want to start a life. They want to raise a family. They want to live in some form of relative peace. They want to live along neighbors who aren't going to bug them or possibly commit any form of crimes or anything like that. Because, I mean, living inside of a big city, quite frankly, can, in fact, make you paranoid. But let's watch a little bit more before we get to the overall meat of the discussion.
Whether you agree or disagree with what's happening on the border, and I think we all agree the system's broken and how to fix it.
Mayor Gary Grasso of Burr Ridge received an invite as part of the executive board of the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus. He says one of his questions to Mayor Johnson at this meeting is regarding public safety.
All of us are concerned, of course, about our residents and their safety, and also the migrant safety, and especially here we are going into another Arctic weekend.
This comes as the city says 4 more buses were expected to arrive today in Chicago, bringing the number of new arrivals to more than 34,000 since August of 2022.
We are simply running out of space, and the mayor's team is doubling them up simply because we have nowhere else to put them.
15th Ward Alderman Raymond Lopez says the shelter capacity at the Gage Park Fieldhouse in his ward has doubled.
We talked about having roughly 200 or 250 migrant asylum seekers living at the park, and we are up to nearly 400 now.
He's concerned about health and living conditions, saying they're seeing the same problem at the Pilsen shelter where the 5-year-old boy died last December. He says capacity more than doubled with 2,500 migrants now living under one roof.
We are putting people in harm's way. And for all of the money that Mayor Johnson and his team are spending to address the migrant crisis, we should be able to deliver better.
As for the mayor's meeting, it will take place next Monday at 4 p.m. Several mayors telling me they plan to attend virtually. Reporting from City Hall.
Let me just go ahead and say this. After you see this next part, I'm pretty sure that you're probably going to think to yourself, there is no way in hell that the people who live in these suburban areas, the people that I mentioned earlier, have already paid these very, very high prices to get a brand new house, to get out of the city, to get away from the chaos, are going to be on board with, let's just say, being taxed. This segment is roughly 2 minutes long, and we'll play it all the way through, and then we're going to get to the panic attack situation, because obviously Brandon's not exactly, how do I say, he's not exactly cut out for the job.
I want to know, will you raise a tax, whether it be a property tax or implement something else?
Well, it's interesting. No one has ever asked me if I'm going to raise a tax. In fact, I did not raise property taxes. And still, without raising property taxes, a full investment in homelessness, $250 million, $100 million for violence prevention. We're going to open up mental health clinics. We've eliminated sub-minimum wage. Black and brown women who were tip workers. We're talking about tip workers that's attached to slavery. We abolished that in this city. We've also added paid time off for thousands of workers. We're investing in people. My administration has not missed a beat. We have built an operation centered around people's humanity to respond to this international crisis that the federal government has been negligent in. And while doing all of that, I've still kept every single promise that I was going to invest in people.
So you can commit to you not raising property taxes, regardless of how bad the situation gets.
My budget, the $16.77 billion that I just passed, 41 alders, I believe, supported this budget. And
So
we did all of that without raising property.
I could sit here and talk about anything and everything he said, every little word or whatnot. I'm not going to do that because I think the video would just go on much, much longer than it needs to be. The thing is this right here. This right here is typically what Democrats tend to do. All liberals do this. We got to tax somebody. We got to tax this person. We got to tax that person. Typically, I am very, very much against tax hikes. I think it depends on the situation. Maybe if there's a lot of corporate greed or whatnot, I may have certain people who say maybe partake in the extreme wokeness or whatnot. Maybe you'll pay a tax for pissing off your customers, or maybe you'll pay a tax for taking part of the agenda. But for the most part, I want to keep taxes relatively low. Lower taxes typically tend to stimulate the economy. If you're going to raise the overall tax rate itself, you need to lower every other tax. That would meaning property tax, obviously payroll tax, things like that. They're kind of like what they did in the mid-90s. Now, that right there I can get on board with because it tends to, let's just say it tends to produce some form of surplus budget. However, this situation right here, especially in the market that we have today with the extremely high rates of inflation, this right here is only going to make the situation a lot worse. It's only going to anger the people much, much more. You see, a lot of times these libs don't seem to realize that everything that they do, they claim that they're trying to help, it oftentimes runs in contradiction with what it is that they want to do. Think about it this way right here. Sometimes we can agree on the actual problem. As a matter of fact, a lot of times we can agree on the problem. However, it's typically the method of how to fix the problem that we normally disagree with. You're probably thinking to yourself, so what does this have to do with his panic attacks? And what does this have to do with not only his panic attacks, but what does this also have to do with the fact that some of these people who live in these suburban areas are probably not going to be paying for it? Well, the thing is this right here. What Brandon wants these people in the suburban areas to do is to shoulder the burden. As I said before, you move to a suburb to obviously get away from the city, to get away from the city's chaos, the politics, the crime. You obviously don't want to have to take on any additional burdens because you have worked for your right to not have taken on those burdens. However, once again, though, a lot of these people did, in fact, vote for the current administration. They did, in fact, vote for the current agenda. All you have to do is take a look at the city of Chicago or the state of Illinois. You know, those good old-fashioned election maps, and you'll see that there's a lot of blue, not just in Chicago, but the overall Chicago land itself, even bleeding into Naperville, Indiana, which, by the way, is a suburb of Chicago. Fact of the matter is that these people are actually getting what it is that they did, in fact, vote for. But then we get the topic of Brandon's panic attacks. Now, like I said before, I'm not going to take an opportunity to beat somebody up because they have panic attacks. I understand anxiety. I understand craziness. I understand hecticness. However, if you brought it on yourself, chances are you probably shouldn't have done that. Okay, you probably shouldn't be doing something that you know, quite frankly, could be detrimental to your health. Now, it's also very possible that Brandon did not know that he was vulnerable. When somebody panics, when somebody shrieks, or maybe somebody, I don't know, just goes into a complete, total hysterical panic over whatever reason, or when the workflow is a little bit too high. By the way, if you remember correctly, the previous mayor, Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot, apparently she was caught on hot mic screaming, "Do not disturb me," stuff like that. I think I'll link the video that I originally did on that in the description box. I'll try to if I can actually find it. If you guys notice some videos missing, I'll explain that in the next video. But the thing is this right here. If you are prone to panic attacks, maybe you should not have a serious position of power. Even though it is the mayor of a city, it's the mayor of a very, very large city, that right there, of course, being the city of Chicago. So I got this right here. I got this little bit from the Chicago Way podcast. I had to go to Twitter. I had to go to Timcast, the Post Millennial, to try to get bits and pieces of this. Of course, the header is going to be over the top to avoid any form of copyright because I don't know if they do copyright you, but let's go ahead and listen to some of this.
Flux, and we don't need to dive into that at this point because it's, as we sit here and tape this, it's getting cold and snowy in Chicago, and Brandon Johnson has got his hands full to deal with that. But you've seen it. You have seen people, your community starting.
No amount of antidepressants can cure him of this problem.
No. He certainly was feeling the malaise.
I know it. It's so true. And I actually, you brought it up. I was going to bring it up, and I thought,
panic attacks. The mayor's panic attacks. Oh, can we talk about that? Yeah.
Can we talk about that? Because two sources told me that he has been in the hospital for these panic attacks, and he is stressed out. Because this is a big, big job for him.
He wasn't ready for it.
He's not ready for it. He is not ready for it. He's not a leader. I'm sorry. He's just not a leader.
He's not.
And, a leader, brings people up and supports them. And the Chicago police are still waiting to see where that comes from. But yeah, he put in a good superintendent. But I still think that he needs to prove himself to the police. Where does he stand on that? But this immigration issue, boy, this is not helping him at all, this situation. And when you call yourself a sanctuary city, you call yourself a sanctuary state, guess what's going to happen? Don't blame Texas, because
Right.
Texas, if you look at what they're dealing with, they have a massive influx.
10
You
times,
see,
yeah.
we don't even show the videos on television. The amount of people that are just standing around, and now they're desperate, because what happens when people don't have money or they don't have food? They start breaking into things. They start committing crimes. They start working for the cartels. They start doing human trafficking. They start becoming victims of human trafficking. So they had to do, what are they going to do with all these people? They had to get them out of their city. And sanctuary city, you're the welcoming city, so you're going to get what you asked for, or what you said you were.
Anita,
So-
I never heard of anyone other than white socialist reporters and the Chapatistas, the hard leftists of Mexico. They come up here. Those are the only people that like the whole sanctuary city thing. I mean,
Of course.
most Latino immigrants didn't like it, as far as I knew. And they didn't care about it. They're just, leave me alone, let me work, let me take care of my kids, just shut up and get out of here. And now we're seeing.
Sounds to me like a guy who's just weak, naive, and stupid. And obviously now we're finding out that he may have some underlying mental issues, maybe some underlying emotional issues, maybe some underlying health issues altogether. That's just what it sounds like to me. Lady, by the way, who's actually talking, this lady worked for WGN, and she also worked for Fox out of Chicago. So she's probably, let's just say, she's probably pretty much in the loop on what's going on, especially given the fact that she's been in that area for over 20 years. Now, she lives in Florida now. I want to go ahead and say that too. But what that guy said at the very end, that it's mostly just the white socialist suburbanite types that are actually running their mouth about this, and the leftists on the more Mexico side, or the more pro-Mexican side of the actual discussion, they're typically the ones who, let's just say, are pushing the whole immigration narrative. It almost goes back to that whole lost provinces thing that a lot of the, let's just say, a lot of the extremely pro-Mexican, anti-American types have. Some of those professors that teach out there in universities like the University of New Mexico, Arizona State, Texas, just real loony people who don't seem to understand that they live in the United States of America, not Mexico. These are the people who typically tend to actually want this type of stuff, the constant amounts of immigrants coming in. And of course, you'll see in the next video another consequence of all the migrants that are actually coming inside the cities themselves. It's leading to crime, it's leading to chaos, and apparently now it's also leading to panic attacks for the mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson. Brandon, you actually did this to yourself. Now, let me say this one more time. I want to kind of echo something that she said. The city of Chicago claims to be a sanctuary city. Sanctuary city, sanctuary status, that right there means that everybody is welcome. We've told you guys before that not everybody should be welcome. I thought Kate's law was a very good idea, but I thought this should have gone a lot further. It should actually remove sanctuary city status altogether. Most of the migrants, most of the people who came here to the United States who did in fact come here the legal way, the right way, or those who may have even came here illegally but have not committed any crimes or anything, which, well, that's a different topic altogether. For the most part, they want to be left the hell alone. For the most part, they want to be able to work and raise a family. We can appreciate that, even though chances are the way you got here is probably not the way you should have. But still, for the moment being, I will digress. The thing is this right here, even these people are saying the situation is completely and totally out of control. It's a very, very personal issue to migrants, especially those migrants who've actually went through the process and got their immigration status to where they are now citizens of this nation. Where these people right here, on the other hand, are coming over, and of course they're expecting some form of benefits, and now the benefits are, well, they're about to be shipped to these homes, and of course Brandon can't exactly handle the stress of everybody calling him out for all the BS. That right there is what appears to be going on here. But the thing about Brandon Johnson, and I want to end the video on this video about explaining the difference between Brandon Johnson and the previous mayor, Lori Lightfoot. Now, Lori Lightfoot, she will forever go down as possibly Chicago's worst mayor. I would say possibly Brandon Johnson could be a lot worse. But Brandon Johnson, of course, is a true believer. He is a true believer in this leftist socialism cause. It's also possible that these panic attacks he's having may be waking him up to the reality that maybe the ideology that he has basically preached the vast majority of his life is probably a bunch of BS. It could be that too. But the thing is this right here. Here is how you know that one is a true believer and one is not a true believer. Back in 2019, former President Trump got into it over the DACA recipients and border wall funding. This was after the initial border surge that occurred in 2019. One of the things that he had said was that, okay, I'll let the migrants in here, or I'll let the people who are already here illegally stay in your city, seeing how it is that they are, in fact, sanctuary cities. Next thing you know, you see Governor Gavin Newsom, you see Andrew Cuomo at that time, you see Bill de Blasio, the mayor of New York, where Cuomo, of course, was the governor. You see everybody in these blue states start screaming and hollering, no, don't bring him here, don't bring him here, don't bring him here. I thought it was an absolute masterstroke by former President Trump to call him out for their hypocrisy. Mayor Lori Lightfoot said, we will take them, and then out of the middle of nowhere, she had to completely walk back everything. Lightfoot, by the way, now claims that we need to do something about the crime. And of course, you're finding out more and more every time that woman speaks that she was never really and truly an actual true believer, just another good old-fashioned plant, which will probably be a project in the future, especially given the Cat Williams, Shannon Sharp podcast episode. But still at the same time, though, that right there is what's going on here. Lori Lightfoot was never actually a true believer in the socialism cause. She's just another greedy Democrat. Whereas Brandon Johnson's an actual true believer, and his true beliefs are now causing him health problems, as well as not only the health problems themselves, but it's also causing the city of Chicago problems. With that right there being said, guys, tell me what you think. Please leave a comment in the comment section. I would love to hear what you guys have got to say on this matter. Please leave a thumbs up. Please also at the same time, please share the video. Please subscribe if you guys are new here. Please hit the notifications bell and also post the videos to Facebook. Also, you guys can find my Facebook here. You can find my Twitter here. Please follow me on both platforms and, of course, my Rumble platform. And I'm going to go ahead and leave this video here, and I'll see you guys later.